Yo, what's up everyone? My name is Yura and we are here with something a little different. I know I haven't really broken up the webcam in a while. It's been since like my Illustrals videos that I think I've actually used it, but I feel like now is a pretty appropriate time because I'm finally playing paper TCGs again fairly consistently. And that is all thanks to Genesys format. If you've been following me on Blue Sky, you know that I have been pretty much nonstop yapping about this format. If you're in Caleb.exe's Discord, I've also been nonstop yapping about it there. It is a format that I have truly come to love. It is so much fun, and it lets me play some decks that I normally wouldn't. Case in point, today we are talking about Mathmech Springans, a deck that I am currently absolutely in love with. I do want to preface this by saying this is not a final version of the deck, not even close. I have so many other variants of the deck that I think are significantly better, and the fact that this deck got second place at my locals is just kind of shocking to me because I feel like this deck doesn't really do that much. That said, I do still want to talk about it and where I think this deck is going to go, alongside give a general breakdown of how to play the deck, because it is some of the most fun I've had piloting a Yu-Gi-Oh deck in a long while. So unlike my normal deck profiles, I don't have Edo Pro set up. I've actually got the cards with me in front in paper because I have the deck built in paper, so I might as well. And the way that I'm going to be going about this is a little different. I'm still kind of be doing the card by card, but I want to separate it based on engines, because Springans is not really a deck that functions off of a normal, like, here's my one card starter, here's my non-engines. This is a deck that functions off of a sort of checkpoint system, where instead of like finding your one card starter and then doing your like same rigid combo that you've been doing for the entire time, this deck functions off of different little checkpoints that you're trying to get to in your combo. And there aren't really any dedicated ways of going about that. You just kind of have to find the line as you're playing. There are some parts of the combo which can be like, oh, you should do like this specific set of interactions because it gets you the most advantage. But a general breakdown is there are certain steps of the combo that you need to hit, and how you get there doesn't matter too much so long as you're actually getting there. So I'm going to describe those milestones as we come across them, as I'm describing the actual cards in the deck, but I'm going to be going about this in a way where I discuss the main engine of Springans, followed by the sub-engine of Mathmech, and then talking about my generic choices, just because I think they work well enough as like different little segments. So starting off with the Springans package, we're going to be talking first about Springans Kit, who is pretty much a Springans in only name. She doesn't share the same gimmick that the rest of the Springans cards do. That said, finding her and utilizing her effects are one of the most important parts of getting this deck rolling. So Springans Kit is a level 4 Dark Beast with an effect that reads, if you have a fusion monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz as material on your field or in your graveyard, you can special summon this card from your hand. And if this card is normal or special summoned, you can add to your hand one of your branded spells or traps that is banished or in your deck or graveyard, and then place a card from your hand on the bottom of the deck. Both of these effects are once per turn. The card that we will be searching is branded in High Spirits. If you're unfamiliar with this card, it reads, reveal one monster in your hand and send one level 8 fusion monster from your extra deck to the graveyard with the same type that has 2500 attack or defense. Then you can apply this effect. Discard the revealed monster, and if you do, add a Fallen of Albaz or one monster that lists that card in its text from your deck to your hand. And then during the end phase, if a fusion monster was sent to your graveyard this turn, you can add this card from your graveyard to your hand, and you can only use one branded in High Spirits effect per turn and only once that turn. So your main target for this is Sprint the Iron Dash Dragon. We're on 2, not because you really need 2 for engine purposes. We're just on Ultimate Slayer in the side deck, and I felt like, why not, right? I don't really have Garuras in paper, so I figured what's the harm in playing a second Sprint? Honestly, it never really came up, so doesn't really matter too much. But the reason why it's important is because of not for Sprint's main effect, you will never actually be summoning this monster, but its graveyard effect allows you to summon a Springans or add to your hand any Springans monster from your deck. And doing this allows you to access an additional interruption in your end board when you summon Springans Captain SARGAS, who we'll talk about a little bit later. But Kit is really important for both of her effects. Both getting access to that extra interruption at the end of your turn, but also being a free special summon after you resolved High Spirits. This typically will let you access a secondary form of interruption, whether it's Time Thief Redoer or in future versions of this build, you can get access to Gaga Gaga Magician, which can then get you into your Foam Armored Xyz line, which is really, really solid. And I'm really sad that I don't really have all the cards in. Xyz Armor Fortress is actually the first card that I've gotten in for that engine, and it is just kind of like came in today, so I don't really have all the cards that I want for that just yet. But Kit is, while not a one-card starter, probably one of the most important pieces of the deck, and you should pretty much always be getting her into rotation through some means or another. And we'll talk about how you go about doing that a little bit later. As for the actual Springans monsters that share the gimmick of Springans, that being attaching themselves to Springans Xyz monsters from anywhere, we're on Triple Rocky, Double Brothers, 1 Sargas, and 1 Branga. Rocky is, I don't want to say the most important of these. Brothers is really, really good and works very well in tandem with cards like the Field Spell, which is probably the most important card in the deck, and also High Spirits. And we'll talk about why momentarily, but first, I want to talk about Springans Rocky. The Rocky is a level 4 fire machine. All the rest of the Springans are machines. And if this card is normal or special summon, you can target a Great Sand Sea Gold Golgonda or a Springans monster in your graveyard except Rocky and add it to your hand, and then it has the Springans effect. Gold Golgonda is the field spell, and we'll talk about that momentarily. It is your main method of actually getting started with a lot of your combos, and Rocky just being able to recycle it out of graveyard if you mess something up or it gets popped by like MST is really helpful. But also notably, if your combo goes uninterrupted, you can use Rocky's add back effect to get something like a Branga or a Brothers into your hand for later use with something like High Spirits, so that you can just kind of like put back a card that you don't really need with the kit and then recycle a Springans monster using the Rocky effect. Speaking of Brothers, Brothers is one of the most important cards in the deck, specifically because it has this line of text on it, and that being, if this card is sent from hand or deck to the graveyard, you can target a Springans monster in your graveyard except itself, special summon in defense position. This is how you will typically be getting access to your Springans kit without using your normal summon, but you can also notably revive a properly summoned Merrymaker or a Rocky or like a Sargas that you've already used. Brothers is absolutely phenomenal. And also, if you manage to do your combo without needing to use its effect until way later, it is really, really solid in variants that aren't exactly this one, just because of how many bodies this gets you access to. But in this variation of the deck, it's kind of just like the best target you can pitch off Gold Golgonda, and also is really good with High Spirits. It's just a generally solid card. That's it for the level 4s. Next up is the level 8s, first of which being Springans Branga, which has the Springans effect, and also you can banish this card and one Springans monster with a different name from your graveyard to add any Springans card from your deck to your hand. There are a lot of really phenomenal targets for this. The problem is getting it into rotation when you already have so many other pieces that you're trying to get going. So if you have an opening hand that doesn't actually have a lot of the pieces that you're normally looking for, things like the Therion King Regulus, the Tally-Ho Springans, or the Field Spell, this Branga search can be really hard to get to. If you already have one or more of those combo pieces, it is much easier to work the Branga in because you can send it off of Merrymaker instead of something else that might be really important. But other than that, it's kind of weird. That said, I do think it still warrants like the slot, because while I personally am not that good at the deck, I'm still learning different ways of ordering these combos to make it better. Branga search can let your gigantic champion Sargas search out the Therion King Regulus instead of actually needing to use that champion Sargas search on the Tally-Ho, because this can search the Tally-Ho instead. Captain Sargas is the only Springans monster that you really do not want to see at any point of your combo, because this is the card that you will be summoning from your deck off of Sprind. And the reason for that is because Captain Sargas reads, apart from the normal Springans effect, and also giving a Springans Xyz monster that has this card as material 500 additional attack, it has an additional effect to, during your opponent's turn, quick effect, detach a material from an Xyz monster you control, then target a face-up card on the field and destroy it. On its own, it's just kind of your opponent's turn interruption, but it works phenomenally well with your gigantic champion Sargas. This is a card that I will talk a little bit more about when we get to the extra deck, but gigantic champion Sargas has an effect that when a Xyz material is detached from anything, anywhere on the field, it can either destroy or bounce a different card on the field. So when combined with Captain Sargas, this is either 2 pops or a pop and a bounce. And also, like, this just really helps your general end board, especially in this variation of the deck when it is not backed up by that much. Champion Sargas plus regular Sargas just does so much, and it is the main reason why I was able to actually take second place, despite a lot of the rest of this deck not being either super consistent or able to see its main combo really like all the time. The only other monster that is a part of this engine is Therion King Rangelus, because he is an Omni Negate that we can search out. That's it. That's literally it. It's fine. If you find it in the opener, it's even better, but like, I don't know. This card's kind of hard to work into combos in the current variation of the deck. I'm sure there's a better way of going about it. I just haven't really figured it out yet. On to the spells, which is where a lot of the power of this engine is kind of housed. We've got triple Great Sand Sea Gold Golgonda, which is your main play starter. And then I'm also going to talk about Tally-Ho Springans, because the other spell cards in this deck, while they are powerful, they're kind of just consistency pieces. So Great Sand Sea Gold Golgonda is the most important card of the deck. If you're not finding it, you're playing a much worse version of the deck. And it reads, all Springans Xyz monsters on the field gain 1,000 attack, and you can only use each of the following effects of Gold Golgonda once per turn. If you control no Springans Xyz monsters, you can discard a Springans card, then special summon a Springans Xyz monster from your extra deck. And if a face-up Xyz monster you control leaves the field by card effect, except during the damage step, you can target one monster your opponent controls, and it cannot attack for the rest of this turn, even if this card leaves the field. So Gold Golgonda's main power is all centralized in that second effect, that special summoning of an Xyz monster from your extra deck, because cards like Springans Merrymaker, Springans X-Blower, both don't really care about specifically being Xyz summoned. Merrymaker specifically procs on special summon for its on summon effect, and Explorer does not have an on summon at all. But notably, these cards don't specifically need Xyz material on them when you summon them, because all of the main deck Springan guys that aren't exactly Springan's kit can just attach themselves for material from anywhere that you have them in rotation. This is one of your main methods of actually getting your engine online, because that discard will also proc your brothers. So if you got a kit in rotation and you've summoned a Merrymaker by ditching a brothers, you can then revive that kit and get your Brandon High Spirit Search and then go off from there. Gold Golgonda is, I want to call one of the checkpoints of the combo, but it's kind of like the starting point for your main combo. Because I'm going to be honest, if you find some way to combo without Gold Golgonda, it's really difficult to actually work Gold Golgonda into the rest of your end board, because typically that'll mean you have to go through like a Branga search of like Watch or Booty, and that sucks. That is super not ideal, but you can do it, I guess, if you find the line. Genuinely, if you find a consistent line of getting Branga into rotation while also not sacrificing the Tally-Ho search from Champion Sargas, or you need to do some weird thing where like you sacrifice maybe your Mathmech line, would love to hear it. Please do leave that in the comments below. I am always looking to improve with this deck, because it is just so much fun. The next most important spell is Tally-Ho Springans. This is functionally a custom card. It is Rhoda plus Soul Charge in the exact same card. On a quick play spell, no doubt. So if your opponent hits you with a droll on the search of this card from the Champion Sargas, you can just use Tally-Ho in response and do functionally the same thing. Your end board will still be significantly hampered because droll does kind of kill this deck, but you can at least do something about it. Tally-Ho Springans reads, when you activate this card, you can also detach up to 3 materials from monsters you control. Add a Springans monster from your deck to your hand. Then if you detach any material at activation, you can special summon that many Springans monsters from your hand or graveyard. And then also during your main phase, if this card is in your graveyard, you can target an Xyz monster on the field that detach a material from it. And if you do, add this card to your hand. But you can only use one Tally-Ho Springans effect per turn, and only once that turn. I'm going to be honest, that second effect has like pretty much never ever come up for me. I really want to be activating this card every chance that I get access to it, and not being able to use it in hand after you add it back from grave really sucks. but the first effect is just so powerful that it really doesn't matter that much. I don't really need to explain why this card is so important. It is also one of your main checkpoints for the combo just because of how powerful it is. Like, it's Rhoda plus Soul Charge. I don't really know what else you want me to say. It's super easily accessible. Champion Sargas sets it up all on its own. Just an incredibly powerful card. Really, really solid. The rest of the spells in the deck are mostly consistency pieces. Springans Watch at 3 and Springans Booty at 3. Both of these cards are different ways of getting access to Gold Golgonda, with Booty being the better one. Booty is a continuous spell that reads, if a face-up Xyz monster you control leaves the field by card effect, you can target an effect monster your opponent controls, and neither player can activate that effect monster's effects on the field this turn. But the more important effect of this is you can send this face-up card to your graveyard, activate a Great Sansi Gold Golgonda directly from your deck or graveyard, and you can only use each effect of Springans Booty once per turn. Being a field spell searcher that manages to dodge Droll is unbelievably important and is absolutely the better way of finding the field spell if you do not just open it in your opener. But if you didn't, Springans Watch is another means of doing so, being a add to hand for Gold Golgonda. But if Gold Golgonda is already active in the field zone, you can instead activate the other effect of this card, which reads, add a Springans monster from your deck to your hand, and if you do, send a Springans monster from your deck to the graveyard. You can only activate one Springans Watch per turn. A very simple effect that is unbelievably powerful. And if your opponent does not have Droll and you are able to activate this second effect, you are pretty much guaranteed to go absolutely bonkers with your combo. A lot of these Springans stuff is actually pretty like self-explanatory. You can kind of just like hit the yellow button to take something from Master Duel, and you'll get somewhere pretty nice. There isn't really an explicit way that you have to order your combo. You can kind of free flow it and you'll get somewhere pretty decent. As for the extra deck pieces of the main engine, we've got, of course, the already mentioned Gigantic Champion Sargas. We've got Double Merrymaker, one Explorer, and the Double Sprind. I know I've alluded to these cards a lot already, but I'm actually going to talk about like what they do very specifically. Gigantic Champion Sargas is the most important monster in the entire deck apart from Merrymaker. It is the main method with which you have access to your power plays, and it is super accessible because despite it being a rank 8, Sargas can once per turn be Xyz summoned using a Springans Xyz monster you control, transferring its materials from that card to this, and while this card has material, you can add a Springans or Therion card from your deck to your hand. Also, if a material is detached from a monster on the field except during the damage step, target a card on the field, either destroy or return it to the hand, and each of these effects are once per turn. So not only does Sargas search out either an Omni Negate or Rhoda plus Soul Charge, it is also just like Interruption, which I've kind of already talked about. Its interaction with Champion Sargas, which is how you're actually going to mainly be getting that interaction off, but it also works well with something like Time Thief Redoer or Tornado Dragon, just things that detach for quick effect, because that will also proc the Gigantic Champion Sargas. It can also technically work with the other effects of the Springans Xyzes, which I will touch on very briefly because in my opinion, they pretty much never come up. Merrymaker's most important effect is the dump when special summoned. It just sends any Springans monster from deck to the graveyard, but also during your opponent's main or battle phase quick effect, you can banish this card until the end phase. Then if you banish this card with 2 or more Xyz materials, you can also send a fusion monster from your extra deck to the graveyard that leaves Fallen of Albaz as material. And each of these are once per turn. So this is your main method of getting the other sprint into the graveyard, but unfortunately for Merrymaker, while that detach effect during your opponent's main phase or battle phase is meant to synergize with Gigantic Champion Sargas, instead it's just a much better idea to just like not make a second Merrymaker and just make literally anything else. Or if you do make a second Merrymaker, you could just turn it into a much better Xyz monster, or like just don't make it in the first place and turn that into like a method to access a separate sub-engine, something like maybe Prime Mathmech Immersion. Explorer is a little different though. Explorer is mostly a going second card. It is technically a rank 8, but you can just summon it off of Gold Golgonda. And this card reads, you can choose one of your opponent's monster zones or spell and trap zones, detach any number of materials from this card, and if you do, destroy the same number of cards your opponent controls in that chosen zone and its adjacent monster or spell and trap zones, which is phenomenal for breaking boards. This card actually won me multiple games against Mech Knight Invoked because I was just able to bait out a interaction and then blow up like a set World Legacy something. I don't remember which one it was. It's one of the cards that like reborns a Mech Knight and then does something. But Explorer was able to target a Mechaba, destroy a Meltdown, the Mechaba, and a whatever step back row it was, all in one effect activation because I've already baited out the Mechaba. Super, super sick. I love this card so much, but I would never run more than one because you don't really need it. Rocky can just like recycle your Springans exceeds, so you don't really need any more than 5. But Explorer also does have that tag out effect. It doesn't gain anything additional like the Merrymaker does to like send an additional sprint. It just like tags out to dodge effect removal, which is like fine. But typically if you're making Explorer, you should probably just have the resources to end the game anyway. So that is it for the main engine of Springans. I know I yapped a lot about that, but I do want to really quick talk about the Mathmech part of the deck. This will definitely be shorter because this engine is only like 6 cards plus 2 in the extra deck. And it is also not an engine that I'm convinced will stay in the deck going forward. So for right now, the engine is triple circular, 1 Nabla, 1 diameter, and 1 superfactorial. And while this engine is super easily accessible because you can just make Prime Mathmech Alimbertion off of any 2 4s that are sitting around on your field, which you will find yourself in that spot fairly often. The problem with this engine, despite the fact that it makes rank 4s easier, is kind of all set in superfactorial. So the payoff for this engine is a Prime Mathmech Laplation, which can detach up to 3 materials from itself, which you'll be making it with using the superfactorial, to send a random card in your opponent's hand to the graveyard, send a monster your opponent controls to the graveyard, and send a spell trap your opponent controls to the graveyard. The problem with this is that you have to have 3 open monster zones when you activate superfactorial. Otherwise, it is functionally useless. That said, if you can manage to do that, you will get access to Diameter's additional like material effect that gives the Laplation an Omni Negate, which is good, don't get me wrong. It's just really difficult finding the board space to make this engine function. And this engine in and of itself is kind of one of those checkpoints that I was talking about earlier. The second you have access to an Alimbertion, it functionally unlocks this entire line where you'll go on Summon of Alimbertion, detach 2, get circular, dump Nabla, Alimbertion tribute either itself or the circular, depending on if you have like an additional body on board. Turborn the Nabla, then Nabla will get Diameter out of deck, and then you will seize those away for something. It doesn't really matter what it is. Typically, in that case, it's Redoer because it gets these materials into the graveyard, and then it takes the Redoer off the board until the end phase. So during your opponent's turn, you can just like go standby phase, and then Redoer will attach something, and then can banish itself. So you have the 3 materials open for superfactorial, but like that is a lot to do just to get the Laplation off. So I'm not really sure if this is going to stay going forward. I have an updated version of this deck list that is still playing the Mathmech stuff, but it's a lot different, and the superfactorial is kind of like a backup plan in that deck. That's kind of really wanted to talk about with the Mathmech stuff though. It's kind of a self-explanatory engine. It just like helps you get to 4s easier and gives you some form of interruption on your opponent's turn. As for the generics, though, this is where all of our points are at because none of the things in engine are pointed at all. We've got triple infinite impermanence for 39, 1 Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion. This should actually be a 3rd copy of Springans Brothers that I just don't own. So we've got 5 points for Ghost Bell. We've got 21 points for Effect Veiler and 15 points for Droll and Lockbird. The most important hand trap in the format, in my opinion. Imperm is interesting. It is really expensive, and it kind of stops us from getting access to some other pointed cards in like the extra deck and the side deck, but it's fine. Veiler is really good. I was previously on Fuelos in this deck, and I'm not actually sure if that's all that important, especially in this format, but it's something to consider. I've also considered Ash Blossom, but this deck right now is currently sitting at exactly 100 points. And that is because of our last point allotment, which is 20 points for AA Zeus Sky Thunder. Overall, I was actually pretty happy with these non-engine choices. Going forward, I think I am taking the Imperm out and the Ghost Bell out for both space in the main so I can play the full Armored Exceed stuff, which I just kind of don't have in paper yet. And also, I want space in my sideboard to play evenly matched. And I can't do that while spending 39 points on Imperm. But yeah, generally, I'm pretty happy with how this non-engine performed, and I wouldn't change too much apart from like the 4 cards that I already mentioned. As for the rest of the generics in the extra deck, I've kind of already talked about Redoer. It's really solid for this version of the deck because it gets guys off board, so you can actually activate your Superfactorial more consistently. We've got Evil Storm Exciton Knight because it's just a good board wiper. Tornado Dragon is good in 2 back row decks. And then we've got 2 additional Ultimate Slayer targets for Synchro and Xyz. These are probably coming out because I'm likely removing Ultimate Slayer altogether, just because there are better things to be doing in the extra deck, and this deck needs a lot of room in the extra deck to get all of its pieces going. But that's it for the main and extra. I wanted to quickly touch on the side deck. I was on triple Gamma Seal for things that are like Towers decks, things like Lunalite that just scare me into submission. Triple Ultimate Slayer, sided this in a couple times, never saw it, and honestly, I think there's just better stuff to be doing with the space in the extra deck. Triple Dark Ruler No More, love this card, would never replace it. It is so good. Triple Cosmic Cyclone was mainly in here for Odeon and a couple of other things. This could maybe be Twin Twister, but like, you really need your hand advantage in this deck, so it's really hard to justify that discard. And then also Triple Iron Thunder, which is likely coming out, especially with future variations of this deck, just because of how this deck goes about setting up its board. You don't really have a lot of space open to be blowing up an entire column. But overall, I'm pretty happy with the deck and how it performed at the local. So I am really quick going to swap over to Edo Pro and talk a little bit more about the theory of where I think this deck is going in this particular format. So here we are in Edo Pro. This is the current version of the Mathmech version of the deck, and I am really happy with where this list is at. You'll notice the Flying Sea in here in the side. This is supposed to be in the paper one. I just didn't want to go to locals and be a villain for the first time back, so you should probably put this in. I'll probably take the Iron Thunders out for the Gamma CLs going forward, and I think that'll probably be fine. But you'll notice the main differences here from the actual list that I played in paper is the additional copies of Brothers, and we're also on Ghost Mourner in here as opposed to the Imperms, just because I had the extra space in the main deck and the extra points to work with, so 2 additional copies of 7 points works just fine. We're also on a full armored Xyz as a second backup for like having some form of layered interaction, because the Super Factorial, while good, is not enough on its own, I think, to stave off a full push if we get like Dark Ruler No More. The extra deck has seen some pretty substantial upgrades though. I've cut out a couple of things. You'll notice the Redoer is gone because while the Super Factorial is still like fine, getting a 1 Xyz monster off the board is not going to be enough to free up 3 spaces. So we're instead just using the Super Factorial as kind of a backup plan if we get like evenly matched or something like that. In place of the Redoer and the Ultimate Slayer targets, though, we're on the full armored Xyz package. So the Xyz Armored Fortress and the full armored Dark Knight Lancer, both of which are cards that I absolutely adore. I think they're super sick. Replacing the Redoer specifically is the Gaga Gaga Magician, which is one of our main methods to get into the full armored Xyz package because it can just reborn the Alambertian that's sitting in our grave not doing anything. And additionally, because we will just have like an extra additional rank 4 sitting on board, we can turn those 2 into F-Zero Utopic Future Zexal, which is no points, does not require the other F-Zero to make. You can just use the Gaga Gaga Magician plus whatever else is sitting on your end board, because you will have the gas to do so, to make the Utopic Future Zexal, which is, while not a negate, is still really solid, and I think absolutely warrants the slots in here. That said, there is a separate variation of the deck that I am currently building that I'm just kind of missing the pieces for it in paper, and that is Onomat Springans. This is a deck that I think is probably just overall better than the Mathmech variation, because you're not trying to work around keeping your spaces open for Super Factorial, and also just like the things this engine lets you do are absolutely ridiculous. Dodo Warrior is one of the craziest starters in the entire deck. It gets you access to finally like 1-card combos, and while they're not as good as opening like a full nut 3-card combo hand in Springans, it is still absolutely enough to warrant like probably playing this. We're on 7th Takiani in here, bumping us up to 42 cards in the main deck. We're also on 1 less copy of Rocky because it is not nearly as important in the more pure build, and 7th Tachyon is just a much more important card to find because it gets us access to Go Goblinberg, who is also on its own a 1-card starter for the entire rest of the deck. The reason why I'm even considering this engine in the first place is because a big problem that this deck has is spell and trap negates. You can get access to them off of Superfactorial, but again, that requires you actually having the space on your board to activate said Superfactorial, which is becoming more and more difficult as I optimize lines. So it's not really as ideal as just like making Gaga Gaga Girl and searching out Unbreakable Xyz Barrier, which is a absolutely ridiculous counter trap that works so well in this list, just because of the amount of Xyz monsters that we're sticking on board. That's really the only change apart from the finding space for the 7th Tachyon stuff in the extra deck, because we took out the Mathmech stuff. So there are 2 additional spaces, that being for Girl and the 7th Tachyon target, because Starcesis not only gets us access to any Springans that isn't exactly kit or the level 8s, but it also gets us access to any of our really ideal starters for the Onomat stuff. I am really excited to keep playing this deck. I cannot wait to bring it to this week's locals, which is just going to be such a blast. Now that I know the deck a little better, and now that I have more options with the list, I'm still probably going to be playing the Mathmech version unless all of the Onomat stuff comes in, which it probably won't. But even so, I'm still going to be really enjoying myself playing this deck, even if it dies to Droll. It's just such a fun deck to pilot. I'm going to be putting out a more in-depth, like, I don't want to say combo tutorial, but I'm going to be talking more in depth about like the step-by-step checkpoints that you're looking to get to when doing like plays with this deck. But I want to wait till I actually have the rest of the cards in hand, because I think showing off a suboptimal version of the deck in that video is just not really worth it in my mind. That said though, I want to thank you all so much for sticking around. I hope you really enjoyed this video. I cannot wait to be playing more Genesys. I'm going to be trying to do Genesys gameplay stuff on the channel, not just deck yapping, because it's too much fun. And I've got a lot of friends that are playing it, and I would love to bring that stuff to the channel because it's just such an incredible way to experience modern Yu-Gi-Oh! And I urge any of you who have not tried it yet to absolutely give it a try. If you've subscribed to the channel for Meadowlands content, that's still coming, don't worry. If you've subscribed for Alestrals content, that's probably still coming. I'm just waiting for like Clash to be in a little bit of a better spot. But again, if you stuck around to the end of the video, I know this has probably gone a little longer than my normal deck profiles, but I really do appreciate it. If you want to see more of me, please hit subscribe, give the video a like or whatnot. I've also recently started streaming again because my internet apparently lets me do that. So I will have a link to my Twitch down in the description below. I'll still be playing some Yu-Gi-Oh! Over there, but it's a lot of variety stuff. I would not be surprised if most of my streams over there are variety and just like talking. But if you want to stop by and just kind of yap about Yu-Gi-Oh! Theory or talk about Meadowlands or like Genesys stuff, absolutely feel free to do so. That is kind of just like, I kind of treat my stream lounge as just like a way to talk amongst friends and just like chat about the things that I like, that being like Yu-Gi-Oh! And a bunch of other things. So would really appreciate you checking that stuff out. I've got a link to my Blue Sky in the description as well if you want to follow me there and see me yap about random stuff. But that is going to be it for me for today. And I will see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.